Hello, good friends, and welcome to the Pirate Round. I be Captain Skultopus here, and this be the Scarlet Raven, and this be Captain Turner. Captain Turner is our special guest today. He's joined us from the Southern Realm. He's come up with many stories about his travels and many fine victuals and things that we're going to sample. But today we thought we'd bring you a bit of history, and so we'll start out now with a pirate toast. And a pirate toast, of course, is always poured in rum from the cursed crystal skull, carved from the souls of the priests who died in South America mining the silver for the Spanish. And we say to you, any sane man,
on the ship to Tosha.
well, any sane man would run away from these things, but we're not sane, we're pirates. So we say to you now, welcome to the Pirate Round, yar har.
Yar har.
Oh.
Now, what do you think you know about pirate flags?
Well, I know that I've sailed under several, but I also know that a pirate flag be very important to those pirates who serve under it because it be everything about their identity.
Now, we in the Pirate Round, we have our own flag, which you can probably see just a bit of an image.
Just a
which
bit
is,
there.
you know, there's imagery associated with pirate flags and what they say they mean. And I know Captain Turner was asked once, what does our flag mean? You have the red raven, or the crow, the red crow.
Right.
And in mythology, the crow was a messenger. It was also a trickster.
True.
Could also be considered a bird of ill omen.
Ah.
So, the carrying the crow, the red crow, is a sign of trickery, a message, or ill omen is coming to you.
True.
Of course, the white skull meaning death. If you stand against this, you may die.
Yeah, true.
And of course, the cross sabers meaning that we're ready to fight
Yeah,
if it comes to a fight.
that be true.
So that's what our flag means, if you'd be wondering. But you know, not all pirate flags meant what we think they meant, and not all pirate flags really existed.
True.
So I've got some little cards here. We're going to first bring up this flag here. Now this was supposedly Ed Lowe. It's the red guy, the red anatomy on the black. And they say it was used by Ed Lowe, but some say it was also used by Ed Blackbeard Thatch, and was later used, they say, in 1723 by Edward Lowe. But they also know that he had a green flag that had a man with blowing a trumpet who was in yellow, which was to signal.
Right.
And they also say that he had a white skeleton in the middle of, with the dart striking the bleeding heart, and in other hand an hourglass. But there's also belief that this was Richard Worley's black flag with the human skeleton on it, which was also white.
That's something very similar. Is
Very similar.
Modernly attributed to Blackbeard.
To Blackbeard, right? And you know, a lot of flags, what we've come to find out, were modern creations.
Right.
They weren't the flags. We know that flying the black and flying the red was actually a fact. You know, flying the black flag was, you know, surrender and give it to us, or fly the red and no quarter is going to be given to you if you fight back.
Yeah, that's true. Now, upon this flag here, you'll see the red skeleton. Now, it's called the anatomy, essentially anatomy, as we know today, of a skeleton. Inside a person's skin, then you have the skeleton. And they called it an anatomy. And we would call it a skeleton, or then they would call it, you know, the Jolly Roger, or the Red Bones, or certain terms as that. But the thing is they had certain symbols then, didn't they, about different things that they would have, and it would be a skeleton, a hourglass, a skull and crossbones,
Cross sabers.
crossed sabers. Each one of these symbols meant something to them at the time, and so when you would see this here anatomy, you would look at it and go, well, you know, that's about the fleetingness of life and about death itself. And of course, the black flag itself had a completely different meaning, didn't it, Scarlet Raven?
Right. Now, this next one is another one that was attributed to Ed Lowe. But it was also equated to John Quelch and John Phillips. Now, it's most likely it was John Phillips, because when it was turned over to the Massachusetts authorities, when his prisoners took over his ship, it was revealed that in the middle of the anatomy on a dark flag was a man with the dart, with the heart, piercing the heart, and then drops of blood.
Oh, yeah.
With the hourglass. Now, it's wrong that this is actually John Quelch, and probably wrong that it was Ed Lowe, but most likely it was John Phillips who sold this. So a lot of flags that you see may have been attributed to one captain, but really were the fact of another, if at all.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we'll bring upon this next one here, a quick one. This is actually true one of John Quelch, which is the flag of St. George. And we know this because it was highly documented that this is what he flew, even against the Spanish and French ships that he took down around the coast of South America, that this is what he was flying, which was an actual English flag. And this we know as a fact was John Quelch. Now a lot of pirates may actually fly a flag of the Navy that they might have been part under. We know that a lot of times on any ship that ship's lockers would carry many flags. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't have just the English flag. They would have a Dutch, a French, with the fleur-de-lis or the Spanish castles or whatever. And when they would be coming across the ship, they'd be flying that flag high. And then when they get close, they would drop that flag and then raise the new flag underneath their true colors in a sort of ruse.
True.
And to capture or to befuddle the other ships, because they wouldn't know what to do. They wouldn't be ready for action where they'd be ready for action. Now, I'll show you this one. Who's that?
That'd be like, looks like Edward Teach.
They say that'd be Edward Teach's flag,
Right.
the Blackbeard.
Now, here's the interesting thing about Edward Teach. Now, we know that Edward Teach used the bloody flag, which is the red flag, and that he also flew the black flag. Now, there's actually no record of this design at all. This did not appear into any English documentation until 1912, when it was featured in the Journal of Mariner Mirror and was incorrectly tied to John Quelch. And it was probably invented during the 20th century and started to be used in association with Blackbeard around the 1970s. But this is the flag that you see. And I'll pass that over to the captain. We can talk a little bit about that.
There were quite a bit of books that had various flags attributed that came out at about the same time to various pirates that were largely just mythology. It wasn't actually based on any truth.
Right. Now, this is supposedly old Roger, the devil.
Well, these are all
Davy Jones himself.
Yeah. In that time period, everybody understood the certain iconography that they would have. It was based on carvings in graveyards and in churches and in popular mythology. And they would look at these symbols and they would know that everything here had sort of dire consequences. We have the skeleton, which of course is death or the shortness of life. He's got an hourglass in his hand, meaning, of course, the transitory nature of life, that time is fleeting, that you only have a certain amount of time. You have his horns,
or crown,
meaning that he's old Roger, the devil himself. And, of course, the Jolly Roger. And
or Jolly Rouge, which is a French word.
Yeah, Jolly Rouge,
which means red.
It's the red. But he was called Old Roger, that's for the devil. And of course he's got a dart, what they call their spear.
Right, they called it the dart back then, but we would more attribute it to a spear.
And it's sudden death. It's like a bolt from the blue. A person who dies immediately. And it strikes the heart and the blood drops coming off the heart. So all these sort of images would be very familiar to people who lived at that time. And they would understand the meanings of them, meaning that in a sense that it talked about the shortness of life. And it was meant to frighten people.
And at this time, people very much believed in folk magic. And so all of these symbols were very steeped in folk magic of their time, the contemporary folk magic. So all of these meanings would be very personal and very meaningful to them.
That's true.
So the next flag we're going to bring upon, they actually say was Sam Bellamy. Now we're only going to do a few flags. And we're attributing most of them to some of them that were related, like Blackbeard, Edward Teach, or Thatch. And they claim that this was Sam Bellamy's. Now that's myth. We don't really know any flag that Sam Bellamy flew. There is no record whatsoever of what flag he flew. It's possible that Blackbeard flew this, and it's possible that Edward England, who we have mentioned a little bit already, flew this flag. Now this is a typical Jolly Roger flag that we think of, besides Calico Jack's, which is the skull with the crossed bones.
Calico Jacks, of course, had the cross sabers.
Right,
Yeah.
which we'll hit upon in another episode.
Yeah, in another
The
episode.
skull and bones we all recognize today as a symbol for poison
Yes, poison
and death.
or death.
and death.
That's true. Now, there's an interesting thing, and I quote of Marcus Rediker here. In his book, Villains of All Nations, when he talked about in the margins of ships' logs, when seamen died during a voyage, the captain would draw in a skull and crossbones to show that that sailor, and write his name next to it, to show that that sailor had died during the voyage. And a typical thing then in those days was sometimes to put wings on the skull, meaning that the skull was ascending towards heaven, ascending towards the Lord, to be one with the Lord. And of course, pirates, of course, did away with the wings and kept the skull and crossbones, meaning essentially death, because of course many pirates believed, of course, that they weren't going to heaven. They were going to that other place, far, in the opposite direction, because they were so far removed from what typically people would say is the typical norm society. They didn't live there anymore. They were hellbound, so to say.
Now the next one we hit upon, now this is the true death's head. And this is probably most likely what Blackbeard actually flew.
Yeah, probably.
And it's probably actually what Stede Bonnet flew, because Stede sailed under with Blackbeard.
Not true.
And we know that this is probably also what Stede Bonnet flew, because as of the Boston Newsletter, June 1718, mentioned that Stede Bonnet was flying the Death's Head. It was also attributed to Richard Worley, who was another pirate.
Oh. Yeah, it's just a typical skull. There's the idea of death right there.
Right.
And now it's important to understand the idea of flags and how important they were for a ship. Sailors lived and died under the flag of their ship. It's how they took their identity. They were thousands of miles from home. The only little bit of their home that they had would be that ship that they lived on. It was their home. It was their prison.
It was their family.
It was their family. It was their shelter. It was everything to them. And their flag that flew above it, whether it be a Jolly Roger or whether it be the national ensign of England there, the St. George's Cross, it's how they got their identity. And they saw themselves as one big family aboard the ship. And when sailors decided to forsake the national identity and to become pirate, they would forsake then the St. George's Cross or the lilies of France or the castles of Spain,
Right,
or
or
the
the
orange
Dutch
flag
flag.
of the Dutch, and they would come up with the black flag. And the black flag was the rejection of typical societal lawful norms, and they would then join the brotherhood of the lawless, the pirates themselves,
Right.
symbolized by the black flag.
Right, and we know that flying just a straight black flag was quite a symbol. It's like flying the white flag. You know,
True.
the fight like the white flag being truce or surrender.
Truce.
The red flag being no quarter. The yellow flag being we're carrying a disease. So flags had a symbol. Now
Yeah.
modern ships and even into the starting around the time of Napoleonics, they would use signals with
Right.
flags.
Well, they still do.
But during
Yeah,
right,
semaphores,
but
yeah.
during that time of the piracy, they didn't use flags for that. They would fire off a cannon or some other form of communication.
Shout through a
speaking trumpet.
Yeah.
So that was the flags, and the flags that they flew on their ship. Like whether it be the Death Head or the St. George's Cross
Yeah.
or whatever was what they flew.
Yeah.
The last one here is another one probably used by Blackbeard and Richard Worley, but that one's actually a myth. There's no actual attributed to Richard Worley flying this, or really even Blackbeard. It's just the Death's Head. We have a Death Head with the crossed bones, which is another common pirate flag.
True.
But there's no real record. But it's most likely what Blackbeard flew, and maybe even some other pirates.
Yeah, and it represents, the bones themselves would represent that of the skeleton, the anatomy, without having to put an entire anatomy upon there, but you would still have a skull. And in different parts of Europe at the time, soldier units on land would use cap badges that were skull and crossbones. Sometimes they were used by what's called hussars, meaning light cavalry troops who were the elite. and because they were only unleashed at times when you wanted to annihilate an enemy, and then you would send out the hussars. The hussars upon their caps, or upon their badges, would have the skull and the crossbones, meaning certain death to those who opposed them.
Right, now on a lot of tombstones from
Yes.
that era, you will find the skull with crossbones.
Yes, you will.
You know, in modern times, there were militaries that used the death's head as well. But,
True.
you know, we're not going to get into that. But
Well, back then it was a very common thing to wear a ring or a signal or something that would say memento mori and would have a death's head on it to remind you that you too will die. So make the most of the time that you have.
Yes.
Right,
Your life is fleeting.
right, live your life as if it's your last.
Right.
Yes.
Because I think we mentioned in another episode about life that they say you only live once, but actually we live every day, but we die once.
True.
And it was kind of a reminder.
True.
Memento mori.
Right.
Yeah. And
Make
of
it
course,
count.
they believed very much in those days, of course, in things like the Wheel of Fortune, that you would have, a fortune one day and you would have failure the next. And they believed that, of course, death came to us all, and death was a common thing, that many children wouldn't survive, out of
And
their
many
teens.
wouldn't. You'd have families that have many children. And
But only 2 or 3 would survive.
Right.
Death was a very common thing that you often saw people die. And so to them, to see these symbols inside graveyards or churches or even on public buildings or anywhere, you would see the flags and the skull, and you would know that life is fleeting. And that's the symbols that they would have, with the hourglass, meaning your time is up, and things such as that. You would have the flag there. You would have a man. He would be holding his hourglass and saying, "Your time is up," or "Your time is short."
Right.
Before you should give up before we're forced to come aboard you and end your life prematurely.
Right. Now this be just one of many episodes that we're going to be doing about the pirate flags and the myths and facts
True.
and realities of them. And you might be surprised what you learn. It's like the Blackbeard flag is actually not even what Blackbeard flew and was a modern invention. And many of the pirate flags that we have today are modern inventions. In fact, we talked about that in the episode with Henry Avery, and there was a question brought up that you answered to somebody about those flags. And so if you have questions and you see this episode,
Yeah.
please ask. We'll be happy to answer what we know and can and give you all the information. And if there's a specific flag you're looking for, maybe we'll be hitting upon that soon.
True. And in the late 1600s, when so many we call them privateers then, they operated legally, and they would actually fly the national sovereign flags of their countries. And it was a quest for legitimacy, because they would take the prizes and sell them, as a way to get money, and a way to hurt that country by taking their merchant fleet and their war fleet. And so they would often fly the national flags of the ship that they were on. So the idea is that one ship flying an English flag would approach another ship flying an English flag. And as they grew closer and closer, the two of them would believe, oh, well, they're each English, and so we're going to exchange news or information or passengers and that sort. But when one ship would come close, then all of a sudden they would raise the black flag.
Right.
And typically then it would just simply be a black flag.
Right. Now we know that Henry Morgan, when he attacked Cartagena, was flying a black flag.
Like the black flag. And that means,
You don't have all of these things on it. Usually
All these
it would
symbols,
just be a
right.
black flag.
That's just black. Meaning, of course, that we are not of this nation. We are not of this place. We are pirates. We are apart. We are outlaws. And they would fly the black flag, and that would be to scare the merchant ship into surrendering. Now, if that ship did decide to fight, then they would raise the red flag. And many people would think that the red flag would have a skeleton on it or a sword or stuff. And perhaps some did, but mostly it was just a red flag. And it meant no quarter, meaning we won't give you anything. We're going to kill all of you. There'll be no surrender.
We gave
We're
you
not
an
taking
opportunity
prisoners.
to surrender, and you blew it. Now
Yeah.
you're all going to
Now
Yeah,
there's
now you're all going to die.
actually a thing that's done is there are those that will put a black band over their insignia to hide their and that's actually in modern
True.
times.
That's true,
That they
yes.
will cover up, so that way it's almost like saying that we're not acting underneath the our government.
Right.
True.
We're acting independently on our own.
That's true. And in a more modern era, and here's something that students of history would know about. In the 1830s, during the siege of the Alamo there in Texas, when Santa Anna had bottled the Texans inside the Alamo, he played the song to them, the Degüello, which is they called the cutthroat song, meaning it was sort of a march, kind of a military. We don't really know exactly what it sounded like, but it was sort of a military march song, and Santa Anna's troops actually raised red flags, meaning no quarter to you. We're going to kill every single one of you, and of course they did.
Right. Except for a couple of women.
Except for a couple of women and a slave, they let go.
Right.
So that's what it means when they say no quarter. We raise the red flag, it'd be no quarter. The black flag meaning more of a warning, meaning we are not legitimate, we are outlaws, and we're here to take what you've got. And so when they would see that flag, it would be a symbol of what was to come. And your behavior is expected of them that you are to surrender and submit, and you won't be killed.
Now, remember, we are only hitting upon a few flags today.
Just a few.
We'll be hitting upon others in future episodes, and hopefully we'll have Captain Turner here to discuss those. We'll have to see how the fates hold our journeys and see. But anyway, with that, I think it's time we end this episode.
True.
So we want to say, don't let anybody drag you down, kick you around, beat you around, take you down, whatever. Stand up for yourself. Not to advocate violence, but be yourself.
Be a pirate.
Be a pirate. Be honest
strong
with yourself. Be
Be
strong.
honest.
And
be authentic.
And we hope that you stab that subscribe button and join us for many more episodes of the Pirate Round.
True.
And join us on the Faceless Mr. Book, where we have much information. Thank you to thee who've been following us. Look for some giveaways here in the future, and we hope that you all have smooth sailing.
Smooth sailing. You're hard. Thank you so much.